In the past, Paul Revere was under instructions to warn us, one, if by land, two, if by sea. But that is history. Now we need to know more and move on. Now we have to think about three, if by air, and four, if by internet. The British are coming. The British are coming.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Can you all hear me?
The British are coming.
I'm not fast enough. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Is everybody hearing me?
Do you want to grow your precious metals portfolio, but don't know where to?
The computer always outsmarts me. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Tiger.
Okay. Let's say hello to everyone. Niels Han Dynasty, Joseph Lopez, Space Miner, Frostbyte, welcome. Let's see anybody else. Michael Stacking. Me. Not me, YouTube me, Mimi. Trying to be funny. Check Stacker. Dog World. Hey, honey, how are you? Metal Matt. Lisa Anderson. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. My Kitten. Welcome, everyone. And I want to introduce you to the two guests that I have today. They are none other than Frostbyte and Ian from ARC Silver, Gold, and Osmium. Did I get it right that time? Silver, Gold, and Osmium?
You did. You got them in the right order.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always want to say silver or gold first. Anyway, so we're going to have a very interesting show today. If you've read in the description, we're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve, wage freezing, what happened in the 1970s with the oil, stagflation, and basically see how it compares with everything. So before we get started, welcome, Ian. How you been doing today?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
I'm okay. I'm not working today. It feels so good not to work. So anyway, Frosty, how you been doing, man?
Good. Staying busy. Trying to continue to support you technology-wise.
One of these days, I might get to maybe a quarter of your technological power.
No. No. It's okay. But we talk about this all the time. You have skills in other areas that I will never even come close to matching. So don't be too in a hurry to get on board with the technology train. You focus on the skills you have. They have served you very well, sir.
They have. I just want to build on so I can get ahead and go do other things so I can build the channel. Also help my wife build her channel as well. That's been one of my major goals. So, oh, by the way, since we're talking about wifey and she's on, we have some news. And the news is this. We have a pregnancy. Our two Belgian Malinois, Dean and Zaya, have decided to play house. And my wife tells me that Zaya is pregnant. So I'm going to do some dog stuff videos to get everyone to see what my wife will be putting on her channel. And I'm hoping she's going to put a lot more with dog and puppy stuff to show people what she can do. So that's coming. It's not part of the original plan of everything, but since I was thinking about her and dogs and all that. Thank you, Space Miner. Just thought I'd mention that because I'm kind of looking forward to it, and so is she. So enough about that. We'll
Very cool.
up to speed here in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Now those dogs can tell dad jokes because they become apparent. Yes. How are you doing, Ian?
Good, thank you.
This is the first time you and I have been on at the same time, so it's going to be
certainly.
nice chatting with you.
And you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Neil. I understand. Cats roll and dogs drool. That's what Sally said on that one. Was it Coming Home? Was an old movie from the past?
Yeah,
hey,
but cats will also pee on your clothes. So, just saying. I said, but cats will also pee on your clothes. Just saying.
Yeah. Oh, speaking about peeing, our Black Russian Terrier, Pushkin. I take him out to go potty, and he walks up to the cat, lifts his legs, and pees on the cat. And the cat was so caught off guard, it stood there like a deer with the headlights on, thinking, what in the world? And it didn't move. I think it was just completely shocked and got the full onslaught of it. I couldn't believe it.
That's awesome.
Poor cat.
Did you give that dog a treat?
I tried getting them to stop it. You ever see the size of a full-grown male Black Russian Terrier?
Oh, they're big boys.
Oh, yeah.
They're big.
And Pushkin's no slouch. Hey, Polly Buck, welcome. So, let's get into some of what we were talking about. We were talking about what we did and did not want to cover today. Basically, we decided maybe we'll start, hitting on the Fed and seeing what had happened there. And that led into discussions of things from the past, because a good indication of what's coming in the future has been what has happened in the past. So I'll let Ian head this off, since it was his idea, his baby. What was your idea about the Fed that we originally talked about?
It was just about basically they lie almost all of the time, and it sort of can get me a bit wound up that the consequences of their actions are so disastrous for a lot of us Americans, a lot of people who don't understand what's going on with fiat currency. And then we were talking, weren't we, with Frosty, and he filled in a lot of gaps about causation and correlation of different events. It's easy to link two things that are happening at the same time and say one has caused the other, whereas often it's a lot more complicated. But the patterns go way back, to the early 20s, and the Great Depression that the Federal Reserve caused, and then prolonged the duration to in my understanding, just to extract more wealth and dispossess more people of their homes and land. And it seems to be a continuing policy. And they're even sort of laughing at us even today. Jerome Powell was laughing when he said everybody signed on to the transitory word they were using, this inflation as the consequence of their currency debasement was transitory. He was laughing. But what's the consequence for your American who's on a fixed wage or a wage that doesn't rise much? Now they've got maybe 60% of their purchasing power after 3 or 4 years of 15, 20% inflation. So the consequences for millions, if not tens of millions of people, are disastrous. And here they are sitting a few miles from my store in Jackson Hole, being complete. I've got to be careful what words I use. Fill in the blanks. And it's the arrogance and the sliminess of it and the deceit. And every piece of information they give out, and it's supposed to move the market, their forward guidance, but they are just issue so many lies, and the consequences are just so horrific. And even now, now they're saying, yeah, we're going to start cutting, everything will be fine. Well, as soon as the Fed starts to cut, that's when we enter deep recession, if not depression, every time, because they're not proactive, they're reacting to what's going on. And anyway, I'll let Frosty kick in here now, because I'm just getting a bit a little bit wound up that they can have such arrogance. And these people, they live lives of luxury. I mean, Jerome Powell, what is his personal wealth? Is supposed to be 80 million, 90 million. They have no idea what it's like for the average American.
No, they don't. But before Frosty hops in, I do want to mention about this that started long ago. The Feds, not the Federal Reserve, but the federal government allowed all these paper currencies that existed to get so out of hand and make such a mess, probably guided by them, so that in the 1907, they got everyone to say they wanted the federal government to control the paper currency, and all the states and banks that were making their own currency was all of a sudden outlawed, which I really, and a lot of people really think is going to happen with cryptocurrency. They're using that to make us get used to it so that they can push the CBDCs. In fact, I saw a video not long ago on the local silver mint where he's shown that actually the government does own, the National Securities Administration owns Bitcoin. If you don't believe me, go see local silver mints, a video on that. It was not that old. But then you had the 1910 when the bankers went off to Jekyll Island, and you got 1913, the invention or the birth, if you will, of the Federal Reserve. And then you taught me a brand new historical event, which I'm going to bring up right now. So, and you should remember this because you're the one who sent this to me.
Yeah, I think every American should memorize this, because this was a British dude. And I mean, how long this was 1924. When was the War of Independence? 1776?
Yeah.
Was it ever won? Or was there always a European and British financial elite pulling strings and controlling even the United States? I would propose this has been going on not just from the last 100 years, but this has been going on for a millennia or longer.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I just personally think that I honestly think that the war was the war back in the 1700s. But after the United States started realizing they needed to be trading, then, politics and, who you get in bed with started putting Britain and England back together so that they could trade with each other after the war had ended. And after that, maybe you're entirely right with your theory. So this is so very important here. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to let Frosty do his thing, because that guy's just incredibly intelligent. Don't tell him I told you so. He reminds me how inept at computers I am. Don't tell him I said that either. Anyway, capital must protect itself in every way by combination and legislation. Debts must be collected, mortgages foreclosed as rapidly as possible. In other words, kick people out of their house and take their money. When through process of law, the common people lose their homes, they will become more docile, more easily governed through the strong arm of government applied by a central power of wealth under leading financiers. These truths are well known among our principal men, who are now engaged in forming an imperialism to govern the world. By dividing the voter through political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting for questions of no importance. Thus, it is by discreet action we can secure ourselves that which has been so well planned and so successfully accomplished. Now, is that not proof of a conspiracy?
It's
If you
fact.
want the technical lingo, the answer is no, it's not proof. All that
Okay.
is sentiment. So what they don't include there. So again, I'm not a financial advisor. I am not an expert when it comes to economics and finance, but I am a person that can see both sides of things. And one thing you got to be careful. We talked about this earlier. Looking at the difference between causation, cause and effect, right? Understanding the difference there and understanding sentiment analysis versus actual like legislation, dates, and stuff like that. There's a lot of sentiment. There's a lot of stuff that's said that is true, but it doesn't mean that it's fact. Now, when I say that, it's because there are other things that occur during the history of things that have changed pieces. Now, you talked about 1907 and the panic, and that people actually caused that. No, they didn't. People didn't do that. The banks did. And the reason that the banks did that was because the banks wanted to find out. They had put out something that said, hey, we're going to speculate. Okay, we're going to speculate that this is going to happen. There were two major brokerage firms that were there, and we're going to speculate on this. We think that it's going to go really well, and it didn't work, and they failed. And so the shock that was created by that, and pair that with the 1906 earthquake that happened in San Francisco, a lot of people were looking at things like the mint had been destroyed. A lot of the government had been destroyed during that time frame. You look at the general kind of financial consequences that happened from that particular item. There were a lot of things that stemmed that. But just because the 1907 what happened from banks doesn't mean that the people demanded a central currency. In fact, a lot of people, quite the opposite, were very happy with having their local stuff. Now, mind you, this goes back even farther, as Ian stated earlier. This goes back even farther. But when you look at legislation and you talk about the First Continental Congress and you talk about the Second Continental Congress and you talk about the Constitution, a lot of that stuff changed over time. Were there powerful people in charge who could control money? Absolutely. There always has been, there always will be. So when you look at those things, you have to remember that each one of these things can't be taken as a single catalyst as the thing that did it until we hit 1913. 1913, when those 7 or 8 men sat around in a room and laid out how they were going to turn the U.S. economy into their own private little piggy bank, formed the federal bank, formed that stuff. That was the generation, that was the point in which the generation of our right now understanding of economy was. Now, there were a lot of effects that happened from that. There were a lot of individual items, but it was that particular policy, it was that particular structure that was set. Remember that these people were not elected officials, they were just appointed. They were sitting in a room and it was like, y'all seem to really understand economics. We're going to just give you guys this. We'll put this stuff out. We'll push it out in a couple of days. We'll pop it through Congress. It all looks good. It gives us more power, gives us more leeway, gives us more control. And we will press with that. None of these were elected officials. They were appointed by the president. The president just decided to do these things. Now, why is this important? Because when we look at some of the other situations that happened in time, 1933, we're talking numismatics and the process of the gold, right? Was that a congressional order? Was that a law? No. Yankee talked about this the other night in a stream. That was an executive order. That was an executive decision happened by the president. 1913 was an executive order, or was an executive decision to do this. Now, they took it through legislation. It became law. But it was an executive decision for them to appoint those. Those people to this day are not voted on. They're appointed. Okay. And so I think that all of this stuff happened. We're going to get there in just a minute, Amy. We'll be talking about What happened in 1971? We'll kind of get to some of that stuff because there's something that happened that was really big in 1971, and we'll be talking about that. So I want to be very careful. Again, I am not an economic pro. The reason that I know some of this stuff is I'm a history buff, and I like to look at some of this. There are other people who are way smarter than me to talk about the economics. I'm giving you what is my understanding. I want to be very clear about this. This is Frosty's understanding of this process. There are people who can come back and say, well, that's not quite right. And I welcome them. I welcome them to share in chat. Please tell us why that isn't the case. But the information that we're going to talk about are our understandings of these events. So I want to just lay that out very clearly. None of us are schooled in 18th, 19th, and 20th century U.S. economics. None of us. So all the stuff that we have is conjecture, insights based off of the stuff that we see. So I want to be very, very clear about that up front. Because I don't want anybody going away from this making decisions financial based off what we believe. Okay, that's very important to me. Do not do that. Just get a generalized understanding of what the people in this room are talking about.
That makes good sense. Thank you, Frosty.
Well, it's a CYA for us too. We don't want somebody saying, did you hear what Frosty or you hear what Ian told me to do? No. That's not it. I just want to be very clear about that. Now, Ian, you have every right to be frustrated.
Yeah.
Let that frustration roll. Right? Because
yeah, it is that key phrase in Montague Norman's speech. And let's remind everybody who Montague Norman was. He was the governor of the Bank of England, not quite at the peak of the British Empire, but probably the most powerful man in the world in 1924. And here he is giving a speech to the American Bankers Association. And this speech was obviously transcribed and written down, and it was considered so important that it was read twice in the Australian Parliament. So it got written into the Australian Hansard record in bound books. So we know this is what he said. It was also printed the same year in the Idaho Leader, ironically. That's where I live, in Idaho. So there was people at the time realized this was a revelation to them. And when you look at, there's many key things in there, but look at the sequence of power he describes. Right at the top, you've got his leading financiers. Then you've got using wealth, and then that wealth controlling and using the strong arm of government. So look at the tier, look at the pattern here. This means that our federal government is underneath a power of wealth, which is under. We think when you vote for a donkey or an elephant, you think, yeah, your team's winning. This is going to be better. This is going to happen. But the strings are pulled way above. This is why no one is proposing to balance the budget. No one talks about what actual inflation is. The Federal Reserve will never say that the abnormal increase in the monetary supply is inflation. And if people don't understand that, eventually they're going to get caught working in a hamster wheel harder and harder and harder with a lower and lower living standard. And this is the future for most Americans. And I've got a quote here from Ludwig von Mises, and he puts it way better than me. I've been saying for years, we can have the huge collapse now, or we can put it off and have an even bigger collapse later. And I'm just going to read this. This is Ludwig von Mises. There is no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. The alternative is only whether the crisis should come sooner as a result of voluntarily abandonment of further credit expansion, or later as a final and total catastrophe of the currency system involved. It is inevitable that this fiat dollar collapses, but it can be delayed, and that collapse can be made worse by carrying on this debasement. And if we cease the ever expansion of the currency supply, the current system collapses because the curtain is pulled away and they're just puny little wizard, the Federal Reserve pulling lots of levers, pretending to be almighty and powerful. So this it's not a decision the average American, the voter, we get, if you vote for this election, you will not be able to vote for sound money, for let's ease off on this currency debasement, let's start to balance the budget. That's just not an option. And the reason it's not an option is if any plausible candidate proposed it, they would be assassinated, humiliated, suicided, disappeared, whatever. It's not an option. And this is what really winds me up. The Federal Reserve, they pretend to be the guardians of our financial security when really they're the wolves waiting to feed on the flock of sheep that the majority of Americans are. Just getting literally eaten alive by the actions of the Federal Reserve.
So there's something I want to do for the general people, the people in chat, the people that watch this. I want to talk about a couple terms real quick, just to kind of get you an idea of some of the things that he says and why it's so important and why he's frustrated with certain things. The first thing I want to talk about is something called the Nixon shock effect, and this happened in 1971. And this caused something that's caused stagflation. Okay. So if you've never heard this term, again, I'm dropping a video immediately following this talking about the Fed 1913, what happened, some of the events. So we'll talk about that here in just a sec. I talked to Tiger and approved this, by the way. I'm not just doing it on my own. So stagflation, yeah, smart Alec. Stagflation is important to understand because the purpose for stagflation is it's a way to slow growth and high employment rate by increasing or the accompanying inflation, that comes with it. Okay, so understanding what stagflation is. Now, the theory of stagflation happened back in the late 1800s. It was a British discussion that happened. They said there's a likelihood of it. It was kind of a one-time thing. There were things like the Great Coin Acts that happened, but there was also two events that happened in Britain that happened one in the late 1700s and one in the early 1800s, that the economy was so bad that they did what was called the Great Recoinage. They grabbed all the information, they pulled all that back. They pulled a bunch of money. It cost them a bunch of money. They did all their coins. And from that, there were issues with having full pieces of money to count for, like it's they call it pieces of 8 and stuff like that for the reals. Well, people used to cut coins and chip away at that. And so stagflation was something that as the face value of something went down, it had an inverse effect. There was not money, so people would cut the coinage down. And I can't really talk about how all of that ties together in how it created this concept. But basically what they said is it will really never rear its head again. We kind of understand this. And as long as we get away from centralized control of this, you won't have this. Well, unfortunately, that never went away in Britain, and it happened here. And I think this is one reason that Ian's like, did the war ever win? Or did we ever win the war? Well, it's not really a matter of we won independence, right? But the financial thing has always gone on throughout history. It's always going to go on. It's always going to continue to go on. But there's another thing that I want to talk about. So if you don't know what the difference between stagflation and inflation is, go read on it, okay? Understand what the difference between the inflation, what the difference is between stagflation. But the one I want people to really understand came about during the Great Depression. And if you want to understand anything about where we are as a world economy, you need to understand Keynesian economics. Okay. So if you don't know what Keynesian economics are, you need to look at Keynesian. Keynesian was a a British economic person. His name was John Maynard Keynes. It happened in the 1930s. And he created this effect. He looked at the effects that total spending had on things like the economy, output, employment, and inflation. And he had a centralized belief in his structure, in this economic basis, that government intervention could stabilize the economy. So government intervention with inflation and with jobs and with stuff like that could affect the things. This was all taken during the time of the Great Depression. Now, why is this important? Okay, so Tiger's showing something right now on the screen. And what you see here is you see something just before 1972, or at the precipice of 1972, where the economy, the productivity and happened and all that stuff continued to rise, yet wages and everything flat. It just like died. Okay. All that was due to stagflation and the Nixon shock campaign that happened in August of 1971. Now, what happened in August of 1971 is that Nixon said, hold on, we're putting a stop to all wages. You can't increase your wages, no raises, no nothing. And we're freezing prices. We're stopping surcharges on imports. It's a utilization, cancellation of all of the items from the U.S. to gold. It's all being taken away. It's all done. It's all going to stop. And all of that happened August 15th, 1971. Now, from that, everybody thought this was a great idea. Everybody thought it was brilliant. People voted for it, clamored all over him. Nixon won by a landslide. But in 1972, they realized very, very quickly that it had quite the opposite effect. Okay? This is Keynesian economics in full swing, folks. The government control of something, taking away our basis for the silver and gold standards, right? Taking away the opportunity to back our money up against a precious metal, taking the opportunity for the Federal Reserve, the banking structure, to run our stuff, turning their money into, basically a giant banking club. All of that stuff happened. And from that stemmed a series of events. 1972 to 1973, we started to see the Arabian decrease in oil. We had the great oil issue in 1973, where people were lined up out the door to try to get fuel. There were massive embargoes, all this kind of crazy stuff that happened during this time frame. All of that decision, all of this stuff, 1913, this one, and then what happened in 2008 with the great economic crash that happened because of artificial housing bubbles, because once again, the central banks, the Fed, overspent, overspeculated, jumped in to do something that they didn't really fully have good policies for, and crashed our economy. So when you look at the one thing, and this is my opinion, when you look at the one thing, the one single catalyst in the failure that is United States economics, it's the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. I think it all goes back to that. All the other things that happened were effects from that particular cause. Now, they did that, again, there's always a cost to something that happened. So the 1907 panic, the banks utilized that as an opportunity to say, hey, we can safeguard ourselves by printing more money. It's a way for us to get out of our own debt, right? We don't want to do that. Inflation is, we just print more money. Not a big deal. So I think 1913 was the catalyst that actually stemmed what's behind me here. Basically the downfall of the strength of the American dollar. Now, granted, we had industry that was booming during this time frame, and we had World War I and World War II, where we were building the opportunities, building strengths. Industrially, we were becoming a massive nation. But when you look at the families, there were basically 7, 8, 9 families. You have the Rothschilds that were there. You have some of the others. Rothschilds still considered the most wealthiest family in the United States. They basically run everything. That's a whole railroad thing. You look at the oil barons, you look at who won it there. All of them had a hand in this, right? So when you look at the people that were engaged in the banking system, when you look at the people who were involved in this, it all goes back to a few families, a few men. And I still believe it's that way today. Now, granted, there's enterprise behind it, but again, still, I think everything is done from the power of just a few. Sorry, my rant is over.
No, that's okay. Yeah, there's a lot there, and sort of linking to the power that these financial elites have. It always seems whatever government we have, they get what they want, which is more and more tax breaks, to the point that practically some of them openly boast of paying no tax. And meanwhile, they own the bulk of the companies that have benefited from that ever increasing productivity in the chart we had up. Whereas the wages subsequent to the freeze, but there's no technical wage freeze now. So why are Americans not getting remunerated in parallel to the profits and the productivity of the corporations? Because the wealth is ever moving upwards. And so we've got to the point now, I think, so much of the middle class is beaten down and beaten out almost out of existence. There's no practical resistance to this ever increasing what's the word for a parasite? It's ever increasing parasitic feeding on the population. So there's no resistance to it, really. The only resistance the average person can do is to keep some of their wealth outside of the system that is controlled and gamed. And for me, I came to the conclusion that the precious metals are an incredibly good way of getting out of the system of the fiat currency that has to be increasingly debased to maintain this system that Ludwig von Mises spoke about. And, you know, it's very clear that the only way this current financial system can carry on is for a continuous expansion. More currency has to be created to pay the interest on more currency that is created into existence in loans and mortgages. And it will keep on going till it does collapse and cause a catastrophic collapse, where again the majority of the population literally gets wiped out. We had a taste in 2008, and I came across this transcript of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, and in it they actually mentioned this is a direct quotation. My wife kindly transcribed the video, and it's going to flip probably even faster than we saw in 2008. They were in a room joking about that the public trust the dollar and the American banking system. They were laughing at us. Literally, there was one guy in the room was laughing that the public trust the banks when the banks don't even trust the banking system. And this comes back round to the formation of the Federal Reserve. It was formed very secretively. All the key players who met at Jekyll Island traveled independently. They did not want two of the leading financiers or bankers being seen together on a train or traveling. That was done in secret. It was voted on, I think it was December 1913. And the press, stories were put out in the press that this was amazing. It was going to control the banks and stop the banks profiteering on the people. It was sold as the antidote to the voracious greed of the bankers, when it was actually the opposite. It was setting up the ultimate tool. As JP Morgan said, wasn't it? Give me the ability to create the currency. I care not who writes the laws. And this is a situation we've got because they create the currency, because they create the volatility. They are front running it individually and corporately. And the owners of the Federal Reserve, who we don't even know, always come out on top. whether it's a crash or a boom, because they know it pretty well, probably to the week, if not the day and the hour, when things turn. And even now, and I think I mentioned earlier, as soon as the Federal Reserve starts cutting interest rates, we head into a depression, deep recession. Every time, without fail, there is 100% correlation. Now, you know, and I would say they're just reacting after the event. Yeah, no one is talking about this. You know, I've been to some meetings with where our bank gives you know, advice to millionaires and billionaires, and I asked the guy once, and he just looked at me clueless. You know, this was, I think, about 2 years ago. I said, you do realize when they start cutting rates, we're into a recession, depression, and you should be thinking about advising your clients to prepare. Yeah, it's and that whole dive, the 1970, 71. I mean, 1970, that was the last year. The 1970 half dollar was 40% silver. So all of this history ties into precious metals. You know for sure the writing is on the wall once your actual physical currency becomes practically worthless. I mean, even the nickel now, the nickel is worth more than 5 cents. So I presume those will be going away pretty soon. And when you look at the figures, it is disastrous for people on fixed incomes who trust the system. I mean, I just looked up with this recent all-time high in the gold price. Since January 1970 to date, the pound has 1/130th of its purchasing power left. So that means it's lost. You know, it's hard to conceive of that. I mean, I was 5-6 years old in 1970. You know, and it's like, it's hard to conceive in part of someone's lifetime that your currency can lose 130th of its purchasing power. Sorry, not maintain, keep 1/130th, and the dollar were around 1/70th left. I mean, that is disastrous enough, but what is left is our 100%. And the plan is, the route is for that to go to zero. And it's why people can't conceive of that. I don't know, maybe the lure of the system and the promise of gains and the promise of wealth from nowhere is enough to keep people trapped in an illusion. But it is an illusion where wealth is digits on a server that can never be converted into goods and services. It will end in tears for the bulk of the population. And this is what really angers me at the Federal Reserve. They fully aware of the lie that currency is.
So I want to address something that was just put in the chat by Chad Norfendorf. Okay.
Say that 3 times real fast.
$35 in gold in 1970, $25.25 in gold today. I want to point out what happened there, and there's a major issue with utilizing that. So, and again, I think if I'm not mistaken, Yankee talked about this the other day with Tim. The important piece to understand about that is that when they did the Gold Recovery Act of 1933 and they pulled that information off, when they required gold to be returned, right, during 1933, they gave those promissory notes that had written on it that they allowed payment in gold. Okay, they were given $35 per whatever. They raised it up. That money was designed to assist Britain again, right, in one of those situations. And when they looked at some of the general things that had happened and they were trying to take this off, that $35 price was set. 1971, when they freezed everything, they dropped the rates, they increased the rates, whatever tools that they utilized to have that happen.
Yeah.
They artificially inflated okay, the price of gold and silver. Again, they manipulated the price of these things. So when you see the value of gold and silver increase, it means our economy is taking a downturn, right? It has an inverse reaction to the sum of the two parts. So if the economy is good, we see prices drop. But you got to be careful about certain dates and certain federal or executive orders that cause certain things to drop, because it can make it appear that something is happening that's not actually the case. So be careful looking at just the prices of those without understanding the history that goes behind them, because it may lead you to believe something that is not actually the case. 1933 gold is a great example of what happened and why they forced a certain price. Those people weren't able to get that stuff back after the fact, right? And Tim is a better person to talk about this than I am. He's very knowledgeable about this. I cannot take Tim's thunder. What I can do is say the freaking dude's brilliant. But really understand those things. So don't just look at charts. You've got to know the information. Same thing with if you're looking at like back here, you know, you got stock prices and stuff like that. You can't just look at the chart and know what's going on. You've got to look at the underlying history. You've got to look at the things that were happening during that time frame. And you cannot expect to have a good understanding of what's happening unless you've seen those. So I just want to make sure that I'm not knocking Chad. Please, Chad, I'm not knocking you. I'm not taking that stuff down. There's a lot of people, you understand that, but there's a lot of people who might not. So I just want to make sure that they understand that premise, because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble by looking at a chart and thinking what's going on without understanding why something went. Yeah, Chad, I know you fully understand. I fully know that. I wanted to make sure other people were aware of that, because you got to be very, very careful making decisions based off of charts, because that's where FOMO and reactions happen. We are called, and again, Ian, I don't know your religious preference, but we're called to settle and act, right? So act, don't ever react. Reaction, you make emotional choices, and emotional choices lead to bad decisions. So take a minute, stop, look at what you're doing, and then act from there. So Chad, I wanted to say thank you for that, because that allowed the opportunity for people to really understand. Don't just go back and look at these freaking ups and downs. Go back and look at the history, understand what was happening during those time frames. This is one reason I'm actually in the chat today. Or I'm actually on panel today, was having this exact same discussion with these two. Because again, there's so many different things that affect this stuff that you've got to be very careful saying something has causation, because it's a really tricky web. So be careful doing that.
Yeah,
you've been pretty quiet. Do you want to say something? Ian's like, don't shut me up. Sorry, Ian.
Yeah, no. I am happy to say that the causation of abnormal increase in the currency supply causes the rise in cost of goods and services. That is causation. When from 2016 to 2020, $8 trillion is created, and currently $1 trillion is created out of nowhere, and I'll get back to that nowhere in a minute. Every 96 days, that debasement causes the loss of purchasing power for the dollar. So when it's created out of nowhere, it's not created out of nowhere. It steals from all the existing dollars. That dilution, that is causation. There may be a delay. So we fundamentally know that when you debase currencies, they lose purchasing power.
Yes.
We know that since 1980 worldwide, there is now 55 times more units of currency. The world is not 55 times richer since 1980. There isn't 55 times more the population. Yes, we've got population increase, and there is genuine increase in wealth. If you count wealth as goods, services, buildings, you name it, manufactured goods, you know, genuine GDP. Yes, of course, there's an increase since 1980, but not 55 times. And I can say we fundamentally know throughout history, correlation, that the precious metals always give a thorough accounting of currency debasement because the currencies go to zero. At some point, the dollar will not be able to purchase gold. Whilst it can purchase gold, I would propose, and I agree 100% with Rafi Farber, that the dollar derives its value from gold because it can purchase gold. And it can purchase less and less gold. 1970, gold was still $35. The London gold pool had failed. This is why the US had to give up and temporarily suspend the exchangeability. They had to, because we'd burnt through. We started in 1934 with 22,000 tons approximately, and we've ended up with 9,000 tons. So we'd burnt through that difference. 14,000 tons of gold artificially suppressing the price. And yes, that does make it more dramatic because it was artificially held. It would have risen over that period from 1934 through to 1970. It wouldn't have been $35 when it was let loose. So yes, there is noise and dramatic movements, but throughout reasonable periods of history, gold is the canary in the coal mine. But the difference is this canary doesn't die. It warns that the mine is about to blow up, but it doesn't have to die to do it. And gold and silver and many other tangible real assets, it might be copper, it might be lead, it might be lead wrapped in brass, it might be cigarettes, it might be toilet paper, you name it, they reveal this currency debasement. This is why the lie, which I mentioned too early, when Jerome Powell was stating this inflation is transitory, he full well knew it was not transitory. Jerome Powell, I am calling you a liar. And if you were a British gentleman, I would challenge you to a duel because you are full of shit. There we go. I've said it.
So do me a favor. Tell me how you really feel about this situation.
It's horrific because I've said many times that this is when you steal the purchasing power of a person's effort, their salary, their savings, their pensions, you are stealing part of their life. When someone gets to 60, 65, or whatever age they choose to or have to retire, they're presuming that the promise will be made good, that what they've saved will keep them at a reasonable level of comfort through their retirement, for housing, for health, for food, you name it, whatever they need. But that is a lie that cannot be given. And Alan Greenspan said it plainly because he was asked, can the US government always honor its unfunded liabilities?
No.
His answer was, of course they can, because they create the currency. They can always send out the checks. Then he paused and he said, but what they won't be able to do, what the government won't be able to do, is guarantee what that check will purchase. So that's just double speak for saying, of course we can't. Of course we can't honor the obligations. And those obligations are based on the effort of people who've worked. And if you look at that, we go back to that chart, the increase in productivity has carried on rising. The corporate profits have carried on rising, but that has not been equitably distributed to the people who've actually done the work that have created that wealth. And this is the lie that fiat currencies perpetuate, because, this, if people had been paid in these in the 60s and 70s as they were working, instead of IRAs and bonds and debt instruments, and if they'd been physically allocated these, they would be able to retire very, very comfortably.
So, Ian, I can't see that. If you want to send that to me in the mail, I'll look at it a little bit closer. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. Make him big. There,
nice. St.
Doesn't
Gordon.
that say tiger on the back?
So for those of you that don't know, that is a St. Gaudens double eagle. It's what many would consider the most beautiful coin in the world. It's a fabulous design. I absolutely love that piece. That's beautiful. Yeah,
I-
absolutely amazing.
I like that better than the American Eagle, the American Buffalo, the Canadian Maple. I like that. I think that is.
It's something about them, isn't it? I mean, this is a 1927, so this was just a few years before the making it illegal. I mean, this is America making it illegal to own gold. It doesn't.
Yeah,
It doesn't gel.
Yeah.
The War of Independence, you know, the
Yeah,
Constitution, getting away from European kings and feudal system. The hope of 30% of Europe came here to have a hope, to have a future.
So I want you to know, Ian, that you're triggering people by not having gloves on. Those of us who are numismatists are going,
It's
but no.
At the moment, these are bullion prices.
Yeah.
So, but
But Frosty,
I
me a hard
always feel-
time about not wearing gloves.
yeah, well, you're not handling a $2,500
I mean,
piece.
I own some St. Gaudens. I never wear gloves. I just figured my fur would be protective enough.
I mean, to handle these, you need flipping asbestos fireproof gloves because these are going up in smoke. These are just vaporizing.
Well, not only that, but if you've ever done read the report on what they find on $100 bills.
Oh yeah.
The fecal matter, the drugs, the stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty nasty stuff.
Oh, and look at this. Look at the date. Can you see the date on that?
17?
2017.
Yes.
Yeah. They haven't printed any since.
Well, they don't make any sense either.
So.
Oh wait, that's Canada. Canada
So-
doesn't make any sense.
They stopped making these since 2017.
I was doing a dad joke. I'm sorry. That was.
Just out of curiosity,
I always joke about the Canadian government doesn't make sense.
let me ask you something. If they haven't printed it
Yeah.
since 2017,
Yep.
and I'm hearing that they're still printing money, and we're not at CBDCs, how the hell does this happen?
So, first off, if you want to really understand how that works, go to the Bureau of Printing and Engraving and find out how many of these they printed in 2013, 2017. Look at the runs, look at the pure numbers. Now, I want to go back because what you just showed me reminded me of something. During the Reagan era, do you know where it's between 60 and 70% of all U.S. currency was?
Where it was.
Yeah, where it was.
I'm guessing it was abroad.
Yeah, offshore, not in the U.S.
Yeah.
70% of all of our money was offshore. So think about that, folks. Who has our money? It ain't us. All right. I want you to really think about that because it tells you a very valuable lesson about what our money actually is and where it's utilized. But yeah, if you really want to know the answer to that, go to the Bureau of Printing and Engraving, look at the numbers, see how many of them that were done, and see which ones are released and which ones are still being held. They have statements that show you what's been out, what's been done, which ones are still being held, which ones are being released. So you'll see a full breakdown there of what's there, what's going on. You can look at all that stuff. A good person, if you really want to talk about this, and I'm going to promote his channel, I'm sure he would love that. Blue Ridge Silverhound. If you want to know about currency and stuff like that, go check out Blue Ridge. He does a really good job talking about currency. He can give you all sorts of great insights. And if you collect currency and you like that fancy stuff, there's some other people that I can reference you. Just make sure you send me a message and I'll get you connected to those folks. But yeah, to your point, Ian, I would almost wear gloves wearing the $100 bill before then because of the crap that's on them. But yeah, for the numismatists in the group, they were like, you're touching it. I'll tell you right now, I don't get triggered seeing. If it was a really super high grade, I'd be like, dude, come on, Come on, please don't do that to me.
I guess it's a 60, a 62, 63 probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, folks, these coins have been circulated for years. Fingerprints do matter. I would worry more about it if he was handling a really nice silver coin. Gold is a little bit less affected by oils and elemental things. That's why it can be in the ground for millions and millions of years and come out looking brand new. That's why when they find these hoards, they pull it up and the freaking gold looks like gold. It doesn't look like this encrusted crap. So gold is a little bit more accustomed to that. You do have to be careful, but you're not going to see the same damage. I would have way more issue if he was handling osmium with his hands, or if he was handling silver with his hands.
I mean, if you're talking about the crystallized osmium, it's the most inert substance. So crystallized osmium, no problem.
Oh, okay. What's the osmium that you can't, and it crystallizes
in any other form? It will find a way to react with oxygen. There'll be narrow holes in it. There'll be flaws in it. The oxygen will react with it. Osmium tetroxide will form, which is highly harmful to lung tissue, etc.
Okay. That I know. So when we're talking about, again, that's a very clear point to make. Crystallized osmium is the thing you want to collect.
Yeah. Going back to paper money, you see, I mean, we hold a fair bit of presence, but I think there's only 2.5 trillion of physical hard cash. So if you compare that to the debt of 35 trillion, unfunded liabilities of 200 trillion, derivatives of maybe 3 quadrillion, this is meaningless anyway in the financial, if you look in the pyramid, extras pyramid. So
yeah,
we are so close to fully digital. It's not funny. We are so close. I mean, I had somebody come in the store the other way and they picked out a quarter and a Canadian dollar, and they wanted to pay $26 for both with a card. And I told them there's an ATM around the corner. They never came back. It's like, so we are so digital anyway. We're so conditioned. And I think Tiger mentioned earlier about it might have been you, Frosty, about the Bitcoin and crypto as a conditioning of accepting these completely ethereal measures of wealth. It's going to be a walk in the park for them to switch us over to central bank digital currency.
So as a disabled vet, the only way I can accept disability payments from them is through electronic means.
Yeah.
They don't issue checks anymore. They don't do anything like that. It's gotten so bad that if I want to, like if I have to go to my VA or I have to drive to another location, I fill out an electric form and they just deposit it electronically. It's all done this way anyway. People are like, well, you can opt out of it. No, you can't. Not if you're a vet. You don't have a choice. You're already part of the system. Because you are tied at the hip to the actions of the federal government. That's exactly what you now. I will say this 100%, folks. I tell you this, and if anybody doesn't know me, or somebody watches this and they've never seen Frosty, they don't know who the hell I am. I am a diehard patriot. I love our nation. I stand for freedom. I stand for liberty. But there are things with our finances that just have to be said. Yeah. And so do not mistake my my frustration with the 1913 Federal Reserve Act and say, well, Frosty's anti-government. I absolutely am not. I do have issues with certain aspects of power and control that happen from that, but that has nothing to do with my loathing of this particular act and why I think that it's caused our nation to ultimately end up in the position that it is. So I want to be very clear about where my patriotism is. I want to be very clear about where my loyalties are. I bleed red, white, and blue. I spent time in the military to save our nation, to preserve our rights. So I want to make sure I'm God-fearing. And, I want people to understand I don't talk ill of our government, but I don't necessarily support all of their actions. Okay, so be very clear about who I am as an individual. Yankee, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
How you doing? I want to point something
That's
out.
another dude that is diehard red, white, and blue God-fearing man. That is he's another good dude right there. We were just talking about you earlier, by the way. We're talking about your stream with Tim and some of the stuff you guys were talking about regarding the pre-33 gold and the valuation and how they set that to kind of jack with everybody. Talking about Tim's pleasant words regarding that situation.
Oh yeah.
So that was a great stream, by the way. I didn't get to finish the whole thing, but that was a very fun stream.
I only got to see bits and pieces because I was working in the ER. I watched the rest of it later. And by the way, Yankee, thank you for shouting out my channel. I didn't hear it until about 4 hours after your stream because I had a lot of criticals, but I really appreciate that. Also, I want to point out someone that I really that Yankee brought into our community, which he was already a part of our community, but brought us into the mainstream of our community. And I'm going to show you something because I mentioned this earlier in this live stream. Local Silver Mint. This is a channel you do want to start paying attention to. Even if you don't buy from them, you need to look at this. This particular video, I'll show you here. Trojan horse. Go see this. I'm going to just show you a piece of it. He proves that the U.S. National Security Administration has the patent for Bitcoin. They own it. It's not outside the system. It is the system. This man, local Silver Mint, Silver Dave, is another genius that you gotta watch this. He tracked this thing down. This is the patent number. It was made by another company in the past who sold it and became part of the U.S. Security Agency. And he points out we are being tracked when we use Bitcoin. This agency is a tracking agency. So just for everyone to pay attention to this, please go look at that video.
That's good information, but it's scary.
It is
scary.
It is when you got so many prominent people pumping Bitcoin. I think Robert Kiyosaki was saying it's going to be, was it $300,000 in by 2 days' time, August the 25th? It's when you get statements like that. I had quite a heated debate with a Bitcoin miner, and he said it's going to go to 500,000. And it's like, where does this come from? It's it is frightening. It really is, and to see. I mean, that was always my suspicion that this came from government, and this is why we don't know was it Satoshi, whatever his name is. He's never touched his stake, has he? He's never withdrawn any.
Satoshi hasn't touched anything because Satoshi is a made-up person. He's fictional.
Because as soon as they did, there would be a record, wouldn't there, of that transaction?
There is no Satoshi, dude. Yeah. It is totally fictional. And Silver Dave has shown this. Up until I saw that video, this right here was my number one concern about Bitcoin. Losing the electricity, the internet, whatever, that you would not be able to use this as some sort of currency, whether it be storms or EMP or solar flare, until I saw that. Now, is that not scary?
It is, yes. But because the diehard Bitcoiners will probably just deny and carry on presuming that it is decentralized by the people, for the people. And I mean, that shows what the desire is, doesn't it? It shows the desire is that the financial instrument should not be centralized. We should not have a central bank. And we had two, didn't we? I think I'm correct saying, Frosty, there were two central banks in the US before this third and final one. And they all had expired, they had sunshine, they had expiry dates on them. But the formation of the Federal Reserve, there is no expiry date. It doesn't automatically come to an end.
There are people who say that it was supposed to be done in like 2013, but it wasn't actually the Federal Reserve itself. There were some of the things that went along with it. But there's always legislation that extends things like that. They're usually embedded in other items. And it's those little pieces that, people were talking earlier about the Patriot Act and some of the stuff it did. Overall, the act was decent, but there was some stuff in there that's scary as hell. And so there's always something in legislation that furthers or something the financial power that remains within these people that run it. There's going to always be something there because they're never going to be able to relinquish that power. That's where it's at.
Did you take the tracker out of that one, Tiger?
No, I put it in the whiskey.
Okay. You soaked that one in the JD for a week.
Really? Oh, no. You didn't watch my video, did you?
No, I didn't. Sorry. Did you get some Scottish single malt?
Oh, you did watch my video.
No, I was just guessing you found some Scottish single malt. That's probably the only antidote to the trackers and the.
If you never watched the video, you got pretty darn good at guessing.
You've alluded to it a number of times, but yeah, the video's fun. You got to go check that out, Ian. That was a lot of fun.
What people don't realize is the tracker is not in the coins; it's in the boxes. So you just got to take it out of your monster box, and you'll be fine.
So, people, just as an FYI, Space Miner is joking. Space Miner is joking. Don't put your silver in nitric acid. Okay.
I can't see the comments, so I'm missing out on this.
Right here. This right here.
Jameson.
This right here. Whiskey from the United Kingdom gets rid of the trackers in 30 seconds. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is, hold on a second here. All you have to do is
let him go watch it, Tiger. Don't ruin the punchline.
Okay. I'm gonna have to watch that one.
No problem.
Don't ruin the punchline.
Okay.
So how can we?
You missed the whole humor in it by doing this.
How can we need to conclude on a happy note? I think.
Osmium.
So no. I mean, one real happy circumstance that we are in the US. What a privilege that we can use a highly overvalued currency to buy highly undervalued money. This is a privilege a lot of people in the world have not got. The purchasing power of their currencies has collapsed against gold and silver. If you try to buy with Turkish lira or Zimbabwe or even the ruble is through the floor. Here, for many reasons, the dollar has actually maintained its purchasing power pretty well against silver. And what a privilege we've got. So that's a happy note. It's not all doom and gloom. There is an alternative. You can become your own bank, ounce by ounce or dime by dime.
If you don't hold it, you don't own it.
Yeah. Well, hey, you guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you letting me come up and do this.
Same.
This was fun. This was a good discussion. I enjoyed this. You guys probably are wondering what the hell is Frosty and Numismatistic, a coin channel, doing up here talking with you guys. But it doesn't matter what your hobby is, if you don't understand the importance of where your money is and the fact that you need to preserve wealth in some fashion that isn't fiat, you have a problem. Doesn't matter what your hobby is. And so I am primarily a numismatist, but I absolutely understand the value and the importance of silver, gold. Now, I don't own any osmium. Tiger hasn't bought me any yet.
It's
Ah,
in the crystallized form. It is a tiny, tiny amount of
What did-
actual osmium will ever be crystallized.
what did you say, Frosty? You're going to get me up to your level of computer worldism in 5 seconds or less?
Yeah, in other words, that ain't going to happen. I got no. So I always joke. So Ian, there's an inside running joke with Tiger and I, because he always buys things in sets of 2s or 3. So I'm like, well, where's your third one? And he's like, well, I bought 3. I'm like, no, I only see 2. There's one for me and then the other 2. Where's your third one? So I always joke with him and tease him about that. So this is just a running thing between Tiger and I. I do like what you do as far as talking about osmium. It's good stuff. I've seen some of the people that have the jewelry pieces and they shine the light on it. They show the reflective properties of it. It's amazing stuff.
It is ethereal. It is otherworldly. It really is. And for a man-made process to change the atomic configuration on a process that is much harder than making diamonds is just incredible. And to use the rarest non-radioactive element is your starting point. And then to create a form that is probably 60 times rarer than raw osmium. That the total production would fit inside a 10-inch cube, to give you a visual idea, or 2.5 size 7 basketballs.
That's crazy.
By the time a few percent of Americans have heard about it, the 1/10% of Americans, maybe will have a piece, and then it's all gone. It's the fine, in a way, it's comparable to some of the more rare numismatic coins where you've only got a few hundred or a few thousand, and there just isn't anymore. It is hard to comprehend, and its unique properties are fascinating. The densest element, more abrasive than diamond, more reflective than silver, the most inert element. There's no element or compound that we know of that can resist acid, alkali, or a combination of. Everything else we can find something to dissolve it in. No one has found anything that you can dissolve crystalline osmium in.
There was a comment in chat earlier when we were talking about osmium that if your osmium looks toned, it's because it's dirty.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, because it's so inert, it's not going to.
It can't absorb react to anything. Yeah.
So fun stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Tiger, what words do you have for the closing?
Okay. Everyone, a lot of the stuff that we talked about just reiterates the history repeats itself. Yeah. People in power remain to stay in power. They want to control, usually through money or other commodities such as food, oil, other things. This is never going to change. Being scared by this should only be a motivation. It should not shut you down, because if it shuts you down, you're not going to be prepared for yourself and your family. Let this scare you enough to motivate you. Do something about it. Protect your family. Protect yourself. This is the only way. God's money. God put this here. Man can't make it. Man can't destroy it. The only thing they can try to do is confiscate it. But I don't even think they're going to do that, because they're too damn lazy to come after people's homes. Plus, some of them will get shot. But use this fear. And I'm sorry if I frightened a lot of people, but I needed to show this to you since we were talking about this stagflation. What happened in 1971 with the Fed, the wage freezing, the Arabs controlling the oil in 1971, which caused that graph that I showed you all earlier, the one I'm going to show you again, that graph where you had productivity going up and income's not. It's happening again.
Yeah.
History is repeating itself.
Absolutely. If I can just butt in there, and a big part of that is AI and automation. What used to a car plant. I mean, an example, some of the GM car plants that moved to Mexico, it was old technology. They had 10,000 workers here and they move to Mexico, new equipment, now there's 500 or 1,000. That's going to, when those plants get retooled and set up with the latest robotics, it'll be 2 or 3 workers instead of 500. And that productivity is not going to get passed on to those 2 or 3 workers.
No, that's not. It's like my dad always taught me when I was younger and I was too young and stupid and believed the garbage that our government was feeding us. You know, it was indoctrinated like everybody else. My dad always taught me the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The only time I've ever seen it happen was when someone turned themselves into a prepper of some type. And I'll give you a very short example. Years and years ago, when I was a family doctor, I wasn't working in emergency medicine. I was working in my field in North Carolina. There's this one guy, Dave. He, oh my goodness, he was so dirty. He smelled of creosote. He looked like he had a spit to his name, but the man was a freaking millionaire. He hid his wealth in his home all over the darn place. He had a ventral hernia in his abdomen is about the size of twice the size of my hand, but the guy bought a brand new truck every year with cash. That's the only way to fight the system. He kept his money out of the system in his hiding places at his home. It worked in the past. It worked back then. It works now. It's going to work in the future, which I want to tell my grandsons, if you watch this video, learn from what we're teaching. And your grandchildren, your children, and Frosty's children, and everybody's children and grandchildren. That's one of my main missions in this, is to teach the young ones. And I enjoy doing these videos and with Frosty and Ian, and I mean, collecting this is fun, but it really has a purpose. Yeah. So don't let your fear overwhelm you. Let it motivate you. Let it make you mad to motivate you and protect your family.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's exactly what I tried to do and keep trying to do. I've expressed some anger at the Federal Reserve, but you need to temper that and harness that outrage when you actually discover what the financial system is, and to do what you can about it. And it may be very small steps, but trust me, anybody who's watching us and learning about precious metals for the first time, you will change when you start putting a few percent of your savings into precious metals. It changes completely your attitude. You realize that the insane, and it is insane, the insane pursuit of never-ending return on principle without even understanding what is a store of principle, what is a store of value, what is a store of purchasing power. So even a very, very small step will have a significant change in your attitude and understanding in many areas of your life.
So I said my piece. How about you, Frosty? And what's your closing thoughts?
Well, number one, again, thank you for having me up. Tiger and I had talked about doing different streams. We were talking about when we could do something like this, and then you guys were having a conversation while I was doing some technical support and review with Tiger, and it was like, hey, come up. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the invite, Tiger. Ian, it was a pleasure getting to talk with you. I've seen you and Tiger do stuff. I've heard a lot of people, Long Live Coins and stuff like that, talking about Osmium and some of the stuff like that. I'm definitely interested in learning more about it. Anybody who knows me knows that I am absolutely about education, teaching, training, giving people good information. There's so much misinformation out there that you really have to be careful. This is why at the very beginning I said, folks, I am not a financial advisor. I am not a finance historian. I can give you my insights from what I understand, but do not take the actions of my words today and go make a financial decision. Don't do it. Okay. Simply because I don't have all the tools and the resources. I've not been trained in all of this stuff. I can just tell you what I understand history to be. And I'll be straight up. Okay. There's a lot of stuff I just don't know. What I will do, and Tiger knows this, and anybody who's in the stream should know this, I will do everything I can to research to make sure I give you the best possible answer. And so I appreciate Tiger and Ian having this conversation. I absolutely enjoyed being here. I full-heartedly support your frustration. So I was like, please, Ian, don't hold back. Tell people how you feel. Because you're studied in this. You actually know what's going on. You are a hardcore stacker. You care about our nation. You want people to protect themselves. Gold, silver, and osmium, right? So, or silver, gold, and osmium. Is that your order? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say to people, don't buy any gold till you've got a fair bit of silver. Then buy a bit of gold, and then when you got that, then consider if there's any osmium left. Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, other than that, Tiger and I talked. I told him I was putting something together regarding 1913. I'm dropping that right now. Like, I'm hitting save. It is public. So if you want to go check that out. Now, one thing I will ask you to do is I tried to do something a little bit different this time with the audio. And it sounds a little choppy in some places because I tried to rush it, but the information is good. What is said is I think is very well scripted. So please go check that out. Look at it, provide feedback, and then we can always revisit this. Hopefully we can do this again because I really enjoy. I don't talk about this stuff on my channel because I'm not a finance channel. But I think anybody who handles money, anybody who gets paid, anybody who has any kind of reserve, any kind of wealth needs to make sure that they're protected.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me up, fellas.
Frosty, I just noticed. Thank you for the 5 memberships.
Oh yeah, of course. No problem. I like doing that stuff without anybody saying anything because,
Well, I just noticed it and I wanted to thank you. Okay.
What state am I in? Texas.
Ian, would you do me a quick favor?
Sure.
Would you type something into the chat? I want to do something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's working. I can't see the comments. You want me to type anything?
Anything.
Okay.
Let's see here. Hopefully, because my computer's acting a little crazy.
There you go.
Oh, okay. So at the top of that screen, there's going to be one to the right of it. It says comments. Click on comments.
I've been trying that, and I just get a StreamYard live viewer comments show up on StreamYard. This is an example. YouTube doesn't support comments on videos.
He put it in private chat.
Yeah, but it's StreamYard. We're streaming through StreamYard, but it didn't actually pull StreamYard, so the StreamYard comments aren't going to work. I got you. Okay, so he can't do that. So I can do it. So what is your channel, Ian?
I think it's Arc. Do you know what? I don't know. I think we could have renamed it. I think we renamed it Arc SGO. Pretty certain.
Okay.
Yeah. My wife loads the infrequent stuff I do. I do need to do some more stuff because I'm
at Arc SGO. There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Space Miner.
So yeah,
so I know what you're going to do, Tiger. I'll show you how to do that later.
We will be doing a mammoth osmium unboxing. We just had a huge delivery, so we will probably be filming that tomorrow.
Very cool.
That will be the USA's largest ever osmium unboxing. There we go.
Sounds good. And you're sending it to me, right?
All of it, of course. Yeah.
Had to do that before Frosty got his comment.
Well, I don't know him well enough to make those comments to him yet. And I always do it for joke. Tiger knows 100% that I always joke about that. OC Stacker put in the information. Arc Silver Osmium is a place to buy your precious metals. Contact Ian here. Here's the information, and he gave your URL. So that information has been put into chat. So thank you, OC, for putting that information there.
Thank you.
All right, folks. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I've got to get out of here. I got some family things to attend to.
Yep. I've got dogs to get up a mountain, get some energy out of them.
And I'm going to go ahead and get some more videos finished up in the editing world. So,
thank you, Tiger, for hosting this. This was fun, and I really appreciate your knowledge, Frosty. Yeah.
The man's a walking library, dude. So
I move very slowly.
So, but no, I want to thank everyone for coming to the live stream, chatting it up. Let me take one last look because I don't think we made 50 likes. No, it looks like we made 27. If we would have got to 50, I would have given away 50 cent, 90%. Well, but we can try it again next time. Thank you, Chet, for what you just said. But no, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank my guests for being here and bringing their knowledge and their wisdom and expanding on my not so knowledgeable wisdom. I've got 3 years of stacking knowledge, and I've been running with that and building it faster. But I don't have the value that these two fellows have. So God bless all of you. I want to thank everyone one more time. Thank you, Frosty. Thank you, Ian. And good night, everyone. Tiger Stacker is out.